The tower had always stood at the heart of the village. Built of pale stone that caught the light of dawn and burned with fire at sunset, it rose higher than any roof, higher than the trees beyond the fields. Its bell, heavy and solemn, hung in the belfry like the voice of the village itself. Generations had lived by its rhythm. When the bell tolled at dawn, men rose from their beds and took to the fields, scythes glinting in the mist. When it marked the noon hour, women set out bread and cheese, and workers paused to eat. When it struck the evening toll, families gathered by firelight, prayers murmured and candles lit. Even death itself was measured by the tower, its bell calling out for the departed so that no soul went to the grave without witness. The clock below the bell was no less sacred. Its face of brass gleamed above the square, the hand sweeping steady across its numbers. Merchants set their scales by it, children raced home at its hour, lovers met beneath it when the shadow of its tower stretched long across the cobblestones. To live in the village was to live within its keeping. It was said the tower never faltered. Through storms and famine, through feast days and mourning days, its voice carried. Lightning had struck its spire once, blackening stone, but still the bell rang that evening, as though no force could silence it. The people trusted it more than they trusted the weather, more than the fickle harvest, more even than one another. For the tower did not lie, and the clock did not err. It marked their lives, steady as a heartbeat. And so none of them imagined the day would come when the tower would keep its silence. It began at dusk, as many strange things do. The sun had only just slipped beyond the hills, and the tower stood dark against the sky, its clock face gleaming faintly with the last traces of light. The bell rope hung still, waiting for the hour to be struck. Children played in the square, their voices rising high as swallows darted above the rooftops. Then the swallows scattered. Out of the deepening sky, wings larger and heavier glided down. An owl, broad, pale, silent, swept once around the tower before perching on the high stone ledge. Its round eyes glowed faintly, catching what little light remained. It sat motionless, as though carved there. Few noticed at first. One bird meant little. But the children grew quiet in their games, uneasy at the stillness of its stare. An old woman, crossing the square, muttered a prayer beneath her breath. The next night there were three. They circled the tower before settling into the belfry, feathers brushing the brass of the clock face, talons clutching the stone. Their calls, low, mournful hoots, echoed through the square, and the villagers turned uneasily in their beds. Whispers began. Owls do not roost in towers, some said. They are birds of graveyards, not clocks. Others shook their heads, dismissing the talk. They come for mice, nothing more. But the children carried the whispers further. They said the owls' eyes gleamed brighter than lanterns, that their wings stirred no air, that their gaze followed you even when you turned away. They swore the owls watched the clock face as though they too were waiting for the bell. By the week's end, more had gathered. At dusk, a dozen wings swept across the square, silent shadows folding into the belfry. Their bodies crowded the rafters, their eyes like coins in the dark. The villagers closed their shutters earlier. The old women muttered louder. The men laughed, but their laughter was thin, quickly spent. And each night, when the owls filled the tower, the people waited uneasily for the bell, as though already they sensed that when the hour came, something would change. By the third week, the belfry no longer belonged to the bell. Each night, as the last glow of the sun faded, the owls came. Not one or two, not a dozen, but scores. They circled the tower in wide, silent spirals, wings stretched broad against the stars. Then, one by one, they settled into the rafters, filling every beam, every shadowed corner, until the stone itself seemed feathered and alive. Their bodies shifted in the dark like a tide of shadow. Their eyes shone like scattered embers, unblinking, fixed upon the brass face of the clock below. The villagers who dared look up said it was as though the tower itself had grown new stars, cruel and watchful, gathered too low to be of heaven. The bell rope swayed though no hand touched it. The great tongue of the bell shivered as if to strike, yet no sound came. The air in the square grew heavy with a silence that was not peace but pressure, as though the owls themselves were pressing down upon the very air. The villagers tried to carry on their nights. Men drank in the tavern, women walked with their baskets, children whispered from windows. But all felt it, the weight above, the wings rustling in the rafters. Even when the owls were still, their presence hung like smoke. Why do they gather here? Some asked. Why not in the fields? Why not in the woods? They wait for something, others whispered. And still others muttered, they are sent. They are a sign. One brave youth climbed the tower steps, swearing to chase them out. He entered the belfry with a torch, his shouts bold at first. But when he returned, his face was pale and his torch extinguished. He would not say what he had seen, only that the owls did not move, not one, though their eyes all turned to him in the same breath. After that, no one tried again. By the end of the month, the tower was theirs. The villagers looked up only by accident now, and when they did, they looked away quickly. For every night the owls filled the belfry, and every night their silence deepened. The people waited uneasily for the clock to strike. And in their waiting, they felt time itself grow fragile, as if the hours belonged to the owls now. It was on the night of the new moon that the change came. The square lay dark, the sky starless. The only light came from shuttered windows and the pale gleam of the clock face high above. In the belfry, the owls gathered thicker than ever, a living shroud of wings and eyes. Their bodies pressed close along the beams, their feathers rustled like dry leaves, yet no call rose from them. The villagers lay in their beds, waiting. For all their unease, they still trusted the tower, still trusted its rhythm. Midnight was near, and when the bell tolled 12 times, the night would pass into morning's promise as it always had. The people clung to that thought, as if the sound itself kept the world turning. The hands of the clock crept upward. 11 struck, deep and solemn, the bell's voice carrying over the rooftops. Once, twice, until the 11th note faded into the silence. The owls stirred, shifting their wings, but gave no cry. All eyes in the village turned upward. Curtains lifted, shutters cracked, heads leaned from doorways. They waited for the 12th stroke. The minute hand touched its place. The great tongue of the bell swung back, then froze. No sound rang. The 12th hour passed, but no voice marked it. The hands trembled faintly, as if straining to move, then stopped altogether. The silence was absolute. The villagers gasped, muttered, crossed themselves. Dogs whimpered. Horses stamped nervously in their stalls. Some men swore aloud, insisting it was a fault of iron or rope, nothing more. But their voices quavered, and none dared test the tower door. In the belfry, the owls shifted again. Dozens of round eyes turned outward toward the village, gleaming faintly in the dark. They sat in perfect stillness, their gaze wide and unblinking. Time itself had halted. No bell, no hour, no measure to divide night from day. The village lay suspended, caught between breaths, waiting for a sound that would not come. And beneath the silence, every heart whispered the same truth. The tower no longer belonged to men. By morning, the square was full. The people gathered beneath the tower, their faces pale from a night without rest. They stared up at the frozen clock hands, at the dark mouth of the belfry where the owls still perched, silent and immovable. None had dared to strike the bell themselves. None had climbed the stairs to force its voice. The tower, once trusted above all else, now loomed like a stranger. Voices rose and broke. "It is only a mechanism," one man argued loudly, though his hands twisted at his cap. "A rope frayed, a will slipped." "Then climb and fix it," another answered, and the first turned away in silence. Old women muttered of omens, of death that travels with wings, of time itself pausing when it is unwilling to carry what comes next. They spoke of stories half remembered, towns where bells refused to ring before famine, before plague, before war. Children pressed close to their mothers' skirts, frightened not by the words but by the tremor in the voices that spoke them. The mayor tried to rally the people. He climbed the steps of the square and raised his hand for calm. "The clock is but iron, the bell but bronze," he declared. "It does not rule us. We mark our days by the sun, our nights by the stars. We will not tremble because of birds." But even as he spoke, his eyes kept drifting upward, to the black shapes in the belfry. The owls did not stir. Dozens of them, shoulder to shoulder, their round faces turned outward, their eyes catching the morning light with a cold gleam. The people lowered their voices. They spoke no longer of iron or rope. They spoke of time. If the tower would not mark the hours, what hour was it now? Could a day begin without a toll to announce it? Could a night end? Some swore they had not slept because the bell had not marked the turning of midnight, that the body itself refused to rest when time stood still. Fear spread like frost, silent but consuming. Men hesitated to work the fields. Merchants left their scales empty. No one rang coins in the square, for how could a bargain be struck when no hour divided morning from noon? The tower loomed over them, unchanged, its silence deeper than the cries of any plague bell, heavier than morning. And through the night that followed, the owls remained. Their eyes glowed faintly in the dark, as if they alone still counted the hours men had lost. The days that followed were not days at all. Without the bell, without the sweep of the clock hands, time slipped loose from its moorings. The sun still rose, the sun still set, but the villagers no longer trusted its passage. Morning seemed too long, evening too short, nights endless. Some swore the dawn had come twice in a single span of waking. Others claimed whole afternoons vanished like breath in cold air. Work faltered. Farmers entered their fields, but without the toll of noon they did not know when to pause, when to eat, when to return. Some stayed until exhaustion bent their backs. Others left too soon, certain the day was already over. The markets, once busy and measured, grew confused. Merchants shouted over one another, arguing whether it was too late to trade, too early, or too dangerous. Deals collapsed in anger. Bread went unsold, milk soured. At night, no one slept easily. Children tossed in their beds, whispering that the owl's eyes peered through cracks in the shutters. Men woke sweating, unsure if they had slept an hour or a night entire. Women wept quietly, clutching their rosaries, praying not for food or health but for the return of a simple sound, the steady voice of the bell. The owls never left. Each dusk, they gathered again in the belfry, wings folding in perfect silence. Their weight bent the beams, their eyes glowed faint as embers. They did not hoot, did not stir, but their presence filled the square heavier than thunder. It was said their gaze followed every step, that no one could cross beneath the tower without feeling a shadow fall cold across their back. Arguments broke out among the villagers. Some demanded the birds be driven out, that the tower be reclaimed. Others whispered it was too late, that the owls had come for a reason, that they were keepers of an hour too terrible to be struck. The mayor sent 3 men to climb the tower, armed with torches and hammers. The crowd watched them ascend the steps, their boots echoing against the stone. Minutes passed. Then hours. No sound came down but the faint shuffle of wings. The men did not return. By the 3rd night, no one spoke in the square. The people passed silently, heads low, their lives unraveling without measure. The rhythm of work, of rest, of joy, of mourning, all had fallen into stillness. The village itself seemed to hold its breath. And above, the owls waited, as though guarding a clock that had already stopped forever. At last the people could bear it no longer. The tower, once the heart of the village, had become its shadow. Men no longer gathered in the square beneath it. Merchants abandoned their stalls, leaving the cobblestones bare. Children, once chasing games around the base, now crossed the streets in silence, clinging to their mothers' skirts. Even the church doors opened less often, for prayer seemed thin against a silence so vast. On the 7th day after the bell refused its hour, the elders met. Their voices were hushed, their eyes hollow. They spoke of the missing men who had climbed the tower and never returned. They spoke of the harvest left untended, the work undone, the fear that seeped into every house. And when all had finished, they agreed on what none wished to say aloud: the tower must be sealed. At dawn, the villagers carried stones, planks, nails. They did not ring a hammer, did not raise their voices. In silence, they barred the tower door, one board after another, until the entrance was closed. No man would climb those steps again. No hand would touch the rope. No ear would wait for the bell. The owls watched from the belfry. Dozens of them, their round faces gleaming pale in the light, their eyes deep and dark. They did not stir, did not resist. They sat as though the sealing of the tower was no act of defiance but an offering, as if the people themselves had surrendered what was already lost. From that day forward, the villagers lived by the sun and the shadow. Work began when the fields brightened, ended when darkness gathered. Feasts were held when the moon was full, fasts when it waned. Children grew without knowing the sound of a tolling hour. But no one forgot. The tower remained, its clock hands forever frozen, its bell mute, its belfry filled with watching eyes. At night, when the wind carried the faint rustle of wings across the square, the people barred their shutters and whispered to one another. When the owls gathered, time itself refused to move.